Did you know a mother's curse is the strongest and the most terrifying? This story will prove it. The house on Hemlock Street. I never liked going back to my mother's house. It wasn't far, just a 30-minute drive from my apartment. But stepping inside always felt like being lowered into a damp cellar. The kind where shadows cling to your ankles. The place sat at the end of Hemlock Street, the last house before the woods swallowed the road. A sagging Victorian, 2 stories tall, with narrow windows that seemed to watch from behind yellow curtains. Even as a kid, I had the feeling the house didn't belong to us. It tolerated us, the way a stray dog might tolerate being fed. Inside it smelled of camphor, wilted flowers, and old wood. The wallpaper had once been pale rose, but had since faded into a bruised shade of gray-pink, curled in places like peeling skin. My mother refused to let anyone fix it. She said the house was alive and would mend in its own time. My mother herself was much the same. Fragile in body, stubborn in spirit. Her hair, once the deep black of wet stone, had gone brittle and white, but she wore it long, nearly to her waist. Her eyes were sharp, sea glass green, and when she looked at you, it was less like being seen and more like being measured. We didn't get along, hadn't for years. The argument started after my father left and never really stopped. She'd accuse me of neglect, of disrespect, of bringing shame upon her with my choices. I'd accuse her of manipulation, of clinging to me like a leech when all I wanted was distance. That night, the air between us was heavy, charged, as though the house itself was bracing for another fight. She sat in her usual armchair, the fabric worn thin beneath her bony frame. A string of rosary beads wound tight around her fingers. Her knuckles were white, her lips pale and pressed together. I stood near the doorway, one hand still on the frame, like I hadn't fully committed to entering. My reflection wavered in the glass of the curio cabinet across from me, and for a split second, I thought I saw my father standing there instead of me. Same build, same tilt of the head. But when I blinked, it was gone. I didn't mention it. Strange things had always happened in that house, too many to count. Doors opening when they shouldn't, mirrors catching movements that didn't belong to anyone in the room, whispers that bled through the radiators at night. My mother treated them as ordinary, even comforting, as if the house was keeping her company. Her eyes flicked up at me, pinning me in place. "You only come when you need something," she said. Her voice was soft, but her words carried weight, like nails driven into wood. I opened my mouth to argue, but the light in the room flickered, dimmed, and then steadied again. Neither of us moved. The house was listening. Her words lingered in the silence, heavy as smoke. You only come when you need something. I stepped further into the room, though my hand still brushed the doorway, as if I needed to keep a way out. That's not fair, I said. My voice felt small in the cavern of that house. Isn't it? She asked, not looking at me but at the rosary wound between her fingers. The beads clicked as she turned them. Click, click, click. When was the last time you came simply to see me? I hesitated. Too long. Her eyes lifted, sea glass green, glinting with something cruel. You see, she whispered, always taking, never giving. I shifted my weight, the floorboards groaning under my shoes. That's not true. I've helped with groceries, paid for repairs, your prescriptions. Her laugh was dry, bitter, like a match striking without flame. Scraps. You toss scraps at me and call it love. The words cut sharper than I expected. My jaw tightened. You make it impossible to love you, I said. The rosary stilled. The silence after my words was jagged. The house seemed to lean in, listening. You sound like your father, she said. That name, unspoken for years, slid into the room like a blade. The air turned colder. I glanced toward the curio cabinet, half expecting again to see his reflection there instead of mine. I clenched my fists. Don't, scared. But she pressed forward, her voice low, almost reverent. He left because he was weak. You, though, you were mine. You swore you'd never abandon me. My chest burned. I was a child. You made me promise things a child should never have to say. Her lips curved, thin and trembling. And now you break them. The air in the room grew heavy, charged. The rosary slid through her fingers faster, beads clicking like insect wings. Do you know what happens? She asked, her voice dropping to a murmur. When promises are broken in this house. I swallowed hard. Nothing, because it's just a house. Her eyes sharpened, cold and glimmering. You know better. The lamp beside her chair flickered, dimmed, then steadied again. A shadow moved across the far wall, no source, no shape I could recognize. My skin prickled. I almost turned away, almost left. But something in me broke. Maybe I left because you poison everything you touch, I said. Her hand froze, the beads stilled. She looked up at me, lips parting, and for a heartbeat, I thought she might weep. Instead, she hissed it. Be damned, you wretch. us died with a sharp pop, plunging the room into darkness. I didn't say another word after she cursed me. I didn't have to. The silence was thick, crushing, broken only by the faint tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. The darkness of that room pressed on my skin like damp cloth. I turned, walked out without looking back, and slammed the front door hard enough to rattle the stained glass pane. The night outside was humid, clinging, and I breathed it in like I'd just broken the surface of deep water. The gravel crunched beneath my tires as I pulled away from Hemlock Street. My hands shook on the steering wheel. Anger hummed in my chest like a second heartbeat. I told myself I was done. I told myself I would never go back to her again. Not after that. The first night home, I convinced myself I felt lighter, free of her, free of that house. I poured myself a drink, left the TV running until late, and promised that her words were nothing more than spite spat in anger. But the second night, I dreamed of her. She was sitting in that same armchair, lips moving in silence. Only, in the dream, the rosary wasn't made of beads anymore. It was made of teeth, small, human teeth. They clattered against each other as her fingers worked them. I woke slick with sweat, my sheets twisted tight around me. By the third day, little things began to go wrong. My phone screen cracked without me dropping it. A picture frame fell off the wall, though the nail was still embedded deep. The fridge hummed so loud it rattled the floorboards. That evening, as I left for work, the elevator in my building stalled between floors. I pressed the emergency button, fists hammering against the door, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. When it jolted back to life minutes later, the panel lights flickered in strange sequence, like someone was tapping them in rhythm. And then, in the reflection of the steel doors, I swore I saw her face, faint, behind my shoulder. I told myself I was imagining it. Stress, guilt, nothing more. But somewhere, buried deep beneath those excuses, was the splinter of her voice. Be damned. And I could feel it working its way in. The following days blurred together. I kept to my routine: work, groceries, empty evenings. I told myself nothing had changed, that her words were just words. But I began to notice strange alignments. On the street, lampposts would flicker as I walked beneath them, always in rhythm with my steps. Receipts printed at the grocery store would end with repeating numbers: 6.66, 9.99, 11.11. My coffee cup at work cracked along a perfect spiral without spilling a drop. It wasn't frightening so much as intentional. Like the world had tilted slightly, rethreading itself around me. At night, I'd dream not of her, but of the house, the wallpaper unpeeling like skin, the hallways lengthening into endless corridors, and always the clock, its tick not hollow anymore, but full, heavy, like a heart. I woke one morning and found dirt on my shoes, though I hadn't left the apartment the night before. Soil, dark and rich, like the kind from her garden. I tried not to think about it, but the thought lingered anyway. Perhaps the curse wasn't about punishment. Perhaps it was about being called back. It began with sounds. At first, soft things. A faint tapping in the walls of my apartment, like nails brushing the plaster. Then, whispers behind the hum of the refrigerator. Indistinct, murmured, always just beyond comprehension. I told myself it was nothing. City noises, pipes, neighbors. But the whispers grew louder, shaping themselves into words. On the fifth night, lying awake, I heard them clearly. You were mine first. The next morning, my bathroom mirror split down the middle. Not shattered, just one perfect crack. Running like a vein from top to bottom, my reflection seemed doubled, fractured, like two faces overlapping. By the end of that week, it wasn't just objects, it was me. My shadow didn't always match my movements. It lagged, sometimes turning its head when I didn't. Once, while shaving, I saw it raise its hand before I did, and there were the smells. Copper, smoke, camphor, the scent of my mother's house, blooming in my apartment. Like mold, no matter what I did, no matter how far I tried to outrun it, the curse was settling into me, stitching itself through the seams of my life. I knew then what she had meant. Be damned. It wasn't anger. It was a sentence. By the second week, my apartment no longer felt like mine. The whispers never stopped. They threaded through the pipes, the vents, even the static of the TV when I turned the volume down. Sometimes it was her voice, sometimes not. Sometimes it was a dozen voices, speaking over each other in low, tangled murmurs. Objects shifted when I wasn't looking. My keys in the freezer, my shoes in the bathtub. A stack of books rearranged themselves overnight into a neat tower in the middle of the floor. I tried ignoring it, but the curse wasn't content with tricks. It wanted contact. One night as I lay half asleep, I felt fingers press against my wrist. Thin, cold, unmistakable. I snapped upright, heart pounding. No one there. Yet the faint pressure lingered, like bruises waiting to surface. And then came the smell. Always at night. The air would thicken with it. The sharp, bitter perfume my mother used to wear. It coated my throat, stung my eyes. I'd fling the windows open, but the scent wouldn't leave. She's here, I muttered to myself. She's in the walls. The thought dug deep. She hadn't cursed me from anger alone. She had found a way to follow me, to live inside me. And as I sat there in the dark, across the room clouded over with a breath that wasn't mine. I stopped sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, the dreams would lunge at me. Long corridors stretching out from my bedroom door, wallpaper curling in strips, shadows writhing across the floor like spilled ink. At the end of the hall, she waited, sitting in her armchair, beads in her hands, clicking, clicking, clicking. When I woke, the sound didn't stop. It followed me into the waking world. The click of beads beneath the refrigerator hum. In the elevator cables. In the rhythm of passing footsteps on the street below. Then the voices grew bold. I'd be brushing my teeth and hear her behind me. Clear as if she stood at my shoulder. Ungrateful son. I'd freeze, toothpaste foaming in my mouth, staring into the mirror. My reflection wouldn't move, not at first. It would just stare back at me, delayed, like a recording catching up. The worst came 3 nights ago. I woke to the smell of camphor and perfume so thick I gagged. The apartment was dark, but I could feel her sitting at the foot of my bed. The weight of her body dented the mattress. "Leave," I whispered. My voice shook. The air bent around me. Cold fingers brushed the back of my neck. A voice, not hers, but layered, many voices at once, rasped against my ear. "She damned you. Now you belong." I bolted upright, scrambled for the light, but the bulb burst with a pop, showering glass across the floor. And in the broken dark, I saw her face in the window reflection, smiling, pale, waiting. I didn't sleep again. I don't think I can. I thought I could outlast it. Just barricade myself inside, keep the lights on, wait for it to pass. But curses don't pass, they grow. It started with the walls. At first, just cracks, hairline fractures crawling upward like veins. Then, overnight, they deepened. Black lines splitting the plaster, jagged and raw, as if the building itself was rotting around me. The smell of camphor thickened. No matter how I scrubbed, no matter how wide I flung the windows, the stench clung like smoke to every surface. That night, my last night in the apartment, I heard the beads. Not faint anymore, loud, sharp. The sound of rosary beads clicking against bone. The light in my bedroom dimmed without warning. My reflection in the mirror on the wall didn't dim with it. It stayed lit, bright as day, staring at me with a strange, crooked smile. Then came the knock. 3 knocks. From inside the closet. I froze. The beads stopped clicking. The handle turned. Slowly. Something inside me broke then. I didn't wait to see what would step out. I bolted. I didn't even take my shoes. I just grabbed my keys and ran, barefoot into the night, down the stairwell, out into the street, breath tearing my throat raw. I didn't stop running until I was blocks away, and even then, I could swear I heard the beads clicking behind me. I knew then what I had to do. Hemlock Street. I thought I knew the way. Hemlock Street was only a half-hour drive. A straight shot down the highway, left at the old church, past the railroad tracks. I could have done it blindfolded, but that night, the roads twisted. Street lights blinked out one by one as I drove. The signs were wrong, pointing me in circles. The same gas station appeared 3 times, though I never turned back. When I pulled off the highway to check my bearings, I found myself on roads I didn't recognize at all. Thin, winding lanes bordered by trees that leaned too close. I drove for hours. The dashboard clock spun through the night, yet the moon never shifted. At one point, I saw a figure walking along the roadside, thin, stooped, her long white hair trailing down her back. My throat tightened. I slowed the car, called out, but when she turned, her face wasn't hers. It was mine. Pale, twisted, smiling. I pressed the gas, didn't look back. The air thickened the closer I thought I got. My headlights illuminated fog that seemed to bleed from the asphalt itself. The GPS on my phone glitched. No streets, no maps. Just a single word pulsing on the screen. Return. I drove until my body ached, until exhaustion blurred the edges of the road. No matter how far I went, I never reached Hemlock Street. It wasn't distance keeping me away. It was the curse. The labyrinth wasn't around me. It was inside me. And deep down, I knew the only way through was to stop resisting, to let it take me. At dawn, the labyrinth broke. One moment I was lost on some nameless road, fog pressing in on every side. The next, the trees parted, and there it was, Hemlock Street. The house loomed at the end, unchanged, as if it had been waiting for me all along. The curtains hung still, the narrow windows gazed down like half-shut eyes. I barely parked the car before I stumbled out, sprinting barefoot across the gravel. My chest burned with every breath. I threw the door open so hard it slammed against the wall. "Mother," my voice cracked, raw from hours of screaming into the empty road. "Mother, please." The smell hit me first. Camphor, wilted flowers, and the faint sweetness of dust. And there she was, sitting in her armchair, back turned, her white hair spilling like a veil down her shoulders. I dropped to my knees, hands pressed together, trembling. Please, please take it back. I can't live like this. I'm sorry. I'll do whatever you want, just take it back. The house answered, with silence. The only sound was the steady tick of the grandfather clock. Minutes passed. She didn't move, didn't breathe. Something in me shifted from despair to dread. My heart pounded, my hands shook as I crawled forward, circling the chair. Mother? Her face came into view, eyes wide, skin pale and slack. Rosary beads still coiled around her fingers. Dead. I staggered back, breath tearing out of me. The shadows in the room shifted, stretching tall against the walls. The house creaked, groaned, as though it were laughing quietly to itself. And then I understood. The curse had never been hers alone to give. It was the house. It had always been the house. And now that she was gone, I was all it had left.